The idea that science has got rid of God is 19th century folklore masquerading as 21st century fact. Because science, boys and girls, you'll remember, science is the ongoing process of discovering truth in the natural world. But it cannot break through to the supernatural world. And there is a reality beyond the natural. There is a greater, if you like, a higher truth. And the greatest truth, the greatest reality of all, is the God who brought all other reality into being. And saying that that is true, believing that that is true, is not a leap in the dark. Because God, we would say, has revealed himself. I speak in a Christian church, and I can't speak other than as a Christian. And to say that God has revealed himself in a number of ways, and for most of you here, you'll be very familiar now with what I'm going to say. And the first is, of course, in creation. Atheistic science, as we've covered this, has no explanation for the existence of the universe, and especially for things like the anthropic principle, for all the elements that contribute to life being possible on our planet. The Bible's answer to that question is this: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Or later, to give another of the Bible's sound bites on it, if you like, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Alan Sandage, one of the fathers of modern astronomy, says this, quote, God to me is a mystery, but he is the explanation for the miracle of existence, why there is something rather than nothing. Or listen to this from the American astrophysicist Arno Penzias, who shared the 1978 Nobel Prize for Physics, unquote. Quote, the best data we have are exactly what I would have predicted had I nothing to go on but the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible. I think it's worth paraphrasing that. Here is a Nobel laureate saying, the data that we discovered as we examine the universe, do you know, it's exactly what I would expect if we had nothing but the Bible to go on. If I just read the Bible, that's the kind of thing I would expect to see. Then, of course, we say that God has revealed himself in the Bible in spite of 2,000 years of criticism, investigation, persecution. The Bible remains undented and unscarred, so that Isaac Newton can say it is, and I quote, a rock from which all the hammers of criticism have never chipped a single fragment, unquote. In its history, in its prophecy, and its morality, it stands head and shoulders above any other piece of literature, and there is no human explanation for it. There's no human explanation why all of these authors, over a period of 100 years, speaking 3 different languages, most of them never meeting the others, have written with such stunning, staggering, unique unity about God and man and their relationship with each other. And thirdly, of course, God has revealed himself in Jesus of Nazareth. The Bible tells us that Jesus is not merely an historical human being, but God in human flesh and form. It says things about Jesus that could only be said about God. So forget the last 2 minutes and let me ask you these questions, or make a statement and then ask you a question. Quote, through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. Now that's pretty comprehensive. Of whom could that be said? And the answer, of course, is God. You could only say that about God. I agree entirely. But they are said about Jesus. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. Every form of matter and life, from stars to stem cells and dolphins to DNA, owe their existence to his power and wisdom and intelligence. So here's another statement. In him all things hold together. The whole shooting match, the whole ball of wax holds together in him. You say, well, that could only be said about God. That's, if you like, what Stephen Hawking was searching for when he was looking for the theory of everything. Yeah, that could only be said about God. I agree entirely. But it is said about Jesus that every form of matter and life, as we've already said, and everything in the universe, from the massive to the minute, is under his immediate and total control. It's the power of Jesus that prevents our cosmos from becoming chaos. And here's another. In him are all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge, unquote. Well, of whom can it be said, in him are all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge? There's not one iota of wisdom or knowledge that he does not have. You say, well, that could only be said about God. I agree. But it is said about Jesus. It is said that he knew and knows the hidden depths of the human heart, which is precisely why he's able to meet the deepest needs of men and women today at any point in their life. He didn't come into the world as a psychiatrist, an economist, a politician, a statesman. He came into the world to save sinners, to rescue people like you and me from our greatest need and our greatest danger, and bring us into a living relationship with our Maker. And he did so by living the perfect life that you and I haven't lived, and then by dying on the cross, giving up his own life in the place of and on behalf of others. And we know that what he did was effective because on the third day he rose again from the dead. And that one single fact in history confirms the truth of all the others. I was speaking in the University of Cape Town just a few years ago, and a rather vocal atheist got involved with me in the course of the Q&A session. And he's clearly not here tonight. And afterwards, I got into a long conversation with him until a member who was someone organizing my visit out there, tugged me by the sleeve and said, John, you've got to come away now. You've got to come. You've got another engagement. You must leave now. So I said to this young man, well, look, you've asked me a lot of questions. Could I ask you just one? What do you think of Jesus Christ? And this was how he replied. Now, this is an atheist, don't forget. And he replied, I'm not sure. But I do know that everything hinges on whether or not he rose again from the dead, unquote. Now, that's brilliant. Dominic Smart couldn't beat that. And he's smart. He couldn't beat that. Everything hinges on whether or not Jesus rose from the dead. Now, my friend, I don't know who you are tonight. You haven't got labels, goodies, baddies, don't knowies. I haven't got a clue. You may be a member of this church, maybe a member of another church, maybe you haven't darkened the door of a church in weeks or years. Doesn't matter to me, one hoot. I don't know who you are, and you may say, well, I didn't ask any questions, but I do have some questions, and I'm not convinced, and I'm not a Christian, and whatever. Look, forget all the scientific stuff. Did Jesus rise again from the dead? That's the big deal. Sort that out. Decide on that. I promise you. It's more important than saying, where exactly does science interact with Christianity? Is there a point at which science is a bit weak or Christianity is a bit... Forget all that stuff. Did Jesus rise again from the dead? Because if he didn't, then the whole Christian shebang is a load of nonsense from beginning to end. The Christian church didn't come into being because they discovered a new way to worship, or they had a new outlook on certain social issues. What got the early apostles into trouble and eventually to their graves was they preached, we have seen Jesus raised again from the dead. Now, were they telling the truth or were they lying? Did he or did he not rise again from the dead? And I'm just in the process of finishing the writing of a book in which I examine that issue very carefully. And I've looked at, as far as I know, every single argument to suggest that there's another answer to, the empty grave and the missing body and so forth. For example, one of them says, well, the Roman authorities stole the body. After all, they knew where it was. They put it there, or at least they supervised it being put there. So they stole the body. Well, have you ever heard such poppycock in all your life? I mean, suppose they stole the body, and then the disciples go on the streets of Jerusalem saying, we have seen Jesus. He has risen from the dead. Do you know what the Romans could have done? We'll show you the body. We've got it. It's in custody. And as soon as they did that, Christian church ends and Gilcomston Church isn't here tonight. Honestly, it's as straightforward as that. And some say, well, the disciples stole the body. Why in the world would they do that? The body had been reverently laid in the grave of one of Jesus' friends, one of their number. And what's more, the secular authorities had placed a guard over it to be absolutely sure that it was safe. Now, it couldn't be in a safer place. So why in the world would they steal it? And what would they do with it when they'd stolen it? Hide it in a cupboard, put it under the floorboards, and then go out preaching, we have seen him from the dead. I tell you, it is psychologically impossible for people to do that. For people to be willing to die. Now, people are willing to give their lives to something they believe to be true. The 9/11 terrorists would be a good example. But nobody is willing to put his life on the line for something, listen, he knows to be wrong. I know this is a lie, but I'm going to go out and say it's true, and I may get killed for doing so. Psychologically impossible. And I'll give you just one more. Well, his followers went to the wrong tomb. So the two women who went first there, they went to the wrong place. And then another one went to the wrong place. Then Peter went to the wrong place. Then John went to the wrong place. Why did nobody ask Joseph of Arimathea, whose tomb it was? Do you think he might have gone to the wrong place too? Do you think he would forget where he had purchased a cave in which to lay his own body? 3 years ago, I laid my wife's body in what is to be her grave and mine. Do you think that on her birthday and on Christmas Day and on our wedding anniversary, I scratch my head at the gates of the cemetery and say, where in the world is that grave? Do you think I'd forget? And do you think when the day comes, and of course it will be relatively soon, when my sons have to dispose of my body, do you think they'll have to ask somebody, where did we put Mum? It's as straightforward as that. Do you think they would? Well, of course not. So this cock and bull stuff about, well, of course, they've forgotten where the tomb was. There is more evidence, apparently, that Jesus rose from the dead than that the Romans ever invaded Britain. And we all know perfectly well that they did, because they put Hadrian's Wall up to stop the Scots from going further south. Lord Darling, a former Chief Justice of England, once said this: there exists such overwhelming evidence, positive and negative, factual and circumstantial, that no intelligent jury would fail to bring in a verdict that the resurrection story is true. And because it is, we can say with crystal clarity, science has not got rid of God. Science is an ongoing process of discovering truth in the natural world. But here is supernatural truth. Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, died in their place, rose from the dead, is alive today, and is changing the lives of millions of people all around the world. And my friend, if he has not yet changed yours, he can. And I call upon you to call upon him and to ask him to do for you what he has done for millions of people over thousands of years, and to many who are here in our building tonight.